Well, of all the controversy swirling around the legalization of cannabis, testing for impaired driving remains one of the most divisive. The federal government, as you just saw, announced it would provide money to train police officers to detect impairment, a sobriety test that would be used alongside that saliva or spit test. But is it enough? Does anyone trust the test? This issue was one of the main concerns at the recent Western Premiers Conference. Why do some premiers want the federal government to delay legalizing marijuana until all these kind of issues are sorted out? To find out, I'm joined now from Winnipeg by the Premier of Manitoba, Brian Pallister. Premier Pallister, great to have you on the program. You saw that the federal government's announcing these new training programs for police. Is that enough in your mind to get ready for the legalization of pot?
Well, there's a lot more work to be done, Evan. This is a clear case of the federal government having a nice takeoff but not prearranging a landing properly. So we've got a situation here where we haven't got clarity around what the saliva testing devices will even be yet. Training without having that knowledge is not going to be effective. We're told by the Canadian police chiefs that there aren't nearly enough trainers. We're also being made aware now that the federal government's talking about backing off on its earlier commitment on seed to sale tracking, which calls into question the integrity of the whole distribution model, frankly, Evan. So that's going to mean a download to the provinces of multiple additional costs, which means, of course, higher prices, which means, of course, that this is enabling the underground economy to continue to do what they do and potentially even allow them to expand in their ability to do what they do.
Okay, but you're outlining these problems. Frankly, I talked to the government about this recent testing, and they say, look, we cannot afford to delay because every month we delay, we're just pushing money towards the illegal industries that control the pot industry. We've got to get it done now. That's what they say. What would you like them to actually push the deadline back?
No, well, of course, they've leapt before they've looked. They've, look at Colorado's situation. Recent reports have demonstrated that in Colorado, because of a lack of preparatory work, they've actually increased the underground economy's ability to do business there. What we're doing here, because we're jumping so fast into this change, is we're actually assisting, in some respects, the underground economy. They know our business model. They know our costs. Some of those costs being downloaded by the federal government now are going to make it more difficult to compete, not easier to compete with an existing distribution system.
Bill Blair was on this program. He's the Liberals' pot point person on this, and he's a former police chief. And he said, look, if every critic out there says, wait till you get it perfect, we will never get this done. We have money, we've got controls, we're going to go forward with this, and, we'll fix it as it goes. But he said, we can't wait till we get it perfect. What's your response to that?
Well, my response would be this. You're talking about accident rates that in virtually every United state that has legalized cannabis have gone up markedly. I don't want Colorado's statistics on highway deaths and accidents to be our statistics in Canada. And I don't think that there's a fair argument being made when you say, let's rush to do this and get it fixed later. Look, we don't even know which saliva testing kits are licensed yet, Evan. The federal government doesn't even know which kits we're going to use. How in heaven's name are our police officers supposed to enforce laws around impaired driving when we don't even have that level of preparedness at this point? We're weeks away from an introduction of a product that previously was illegal, that the state is now going to endorse as a legal product. That's going to encourage additional use as well, and that's going to enhance the dangers to Canadians, Evan.
All right, I got to ask you about the asylum seekers because it's a big issue. More and more asylum seekers are crossing the border, mostly in Quebec, but also in your province of Manitoba. These are folks from the United States that if they crossed at a legal border crossing, they'd be turned back under the safe third country rule. But between those legal crossings, once they set foot in Canada, they become part of our system and they can seek asylum. They go into the refugee system. What more needs to be done by the federal government to stop what most of us expect to see, a large influx over the summer?
Yeah, Evan, as you know, Manitoba is the second most affected province, Quebec being the first, and you've also, you know of other provinces that are facing the challenges as well, Ontario included. These are costs that are as a consequence of a border system that is under attack by people who are seeking asylum at the same time are jumping to the front of the system that other refugees use. We've incurred tremendous costs here in Manitoba for a province of our size, and of course Quebec, Ontario now as well are doing the same as a result of needing to accommodate this glaring flaw in our system. And it's not likely to go away. We know that the immigration patterns are going to be influenced by the lack of openness demonstrated by the current U.S. president, and the numbers are very much lower in the United States for accepting refugees than they've been for many, many years. So the pressures are going to continue. I have complimented, and I will compliment, the immigration minister for his willingness to listen to provincial premiers and others, and his willingness to act to try to preempt some of the very dangerous practices we've seen. And of course the federal government needs to enrich their activities in that area.
Premier, one answer is get rid of the Safe Third Country Agreement and declare that the entire border is a legal entry point, at which point anybody caught going over the border at any point can be turned back to the United States. Would you support that system?
No, I think that's a simplistic approach, and I know that this is a complex problem. So I think there are dangers in doing that. Perhaps even in the middle of a NAFTA negotiation, that might be a bad idea.
All right, I got to leave it there. Unfortunately, we had to leave the Jets before the Stanley Cup, but there's always next year, Premier.
Yeah, that was a disappointment, but a great season, and thanks to the Jets and thanks to their owners for their great contribution to Canadian sports community.
Yeah, it was great, but you know, you go to Vegas, you win some, you lose some. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister, great to have you on the program.